what would you say to critics who claim that homeschooled children are not properly socialized? Like that's a big criticism of like homeschooling, right? Is like I don't want to homeschool my kids because like they're not going to be properly socialized. They're not going to develop people skills because they're not going to be around a lot of other children. Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want my child to grow up thinking that basic human interaction will kill grandma. Oh wait, oh wait, that's what happens in public school, right?
Yeah.
Because you start public school and they're told they have to stay 6 feet apart from each other, and they have to wear a mask, and they can't hug, and they can't play, and they can't roughhouse because if they do, they're gonna go home and grandma might die. I mean, could you imagine
Yeah.
that, to a generation of children and the psychology that they're going to grow up with?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I spoke with a mother the other day that I had met who just pulled her child out of school. She was a white woman married to a black man in the military. And she sent her child to school, and her teacher taught this young child that the mother's side of her family, this is what the teacher told her, the mother's side of your family is responsible for slavery, and they were slave owners. And if that wasn't bad enough, that you should identify as black and you should hang out with black people more than white people.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's one thing to tear down Babylon, right? And that whole rant I just went on tears down Babylon. But homeschooling is so much more than that. Because these children aren't, like, people have this perception that haven't done it, that these children are basically getting educated in the same way that they do in public school, right? Like you wake up and at 8 a.m. you will sit and study math for 45 minutes. And at 8:50 you will study science for 45 minutes, right? Like that bullcrap schedule, when homeschool is the complete opposite of that. Homeschool is life school. My child is 3 years old, and a day doesn't go by in which we're not at a park meeting other children. We're not at the aquarium. We're not at restaurants. We're not in town. We're not at our local church where they have all these groups and he's playing with all these children. He's going to music classes at his local church. I meet homeschool families constantly, especially, it's so easy these days. I mean, this week alone, I met 3 separate homeschool families just going around town. And, if socialization is a priority, then socialization is not a problem. So I got their numbers.
Yeah.
And we're already setting up play dates. My son has play dates all the time. He's done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before I moved from New York to North Carolina. I spoke to him today. He wants to get back into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When he turns 4 years old, I'm signing him up for a local soccer team. So this myth, this notion that homeschool children are somehow unsocialized is ridiculous. I mean, pretty much every military family in the United States of America homeschools. What do you think? All of their children aren't socialized? Just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you were talking about it on when you were on Hanging with Bears a couple weeks ago about your move to North Carolina and how like networking is so important, like in general, but then also like when you're moving, like now you have to like kind of reestablish friendships and churches and the groups that you're involved with, the jiu-jitsu gyms you're going to, the churches you're going to, the parks you're going to. I want to ask you to repeat your stories, but how has the networking been going and how crucial do you believe that is?
The network's been going great. And like I said, just this week, I've met 3 homeschool families and we're already setting up play dates. So it's really not hard to get out into the world and meet people, but you have to do it. I think the story you're referring to that I was talking about on Hanging with Bears is I had gone to an ice cream shop with my wife, my son, and my little infant daughter. And I had eaten dinner there. And then during dinner, I actually started speaking with the owner, right? They had like sandwiches and ice cream. So during dinner, I started speaking with the owner, and she brought her husband over, and she was telling me about these stories she does. She says, "Oh yeah, we have kid parties where the children come and they get ice cream, and I read them these books that I've written." And she started reading me these books, and they were phenomenal. I honestly thought, I think she's a better writer than me, which if you have read my I'm not gonna say I'm the best writer, but I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
She was phenomenal. So I said, "Oh, are these published?" And she said, "Well, no, I didn't know how to do that." And I started teaching her all about the process of publishing books. And I gave her my number. I said, "This is an older woman, probably in her 70s." And I told her, "Don't worry about it. Just give me a call, and I'll walk you through step by step the whole process, everything you need, and we'll get your books published." Right? And she gave me her number. She took my number. And after dinner, we ordered ice cream, right, for myself, my wife, and my boy. And we wound up paying for none of the ice cream. And, that's networking. And now I have a lifelong, right, because I put out an olive branch and I did something nice for this woman.
Yeah.
And now I have an ally in this world, right? And my son is 3, but for example, if he was 12 years old and I called her up now and said, "Hey, my son needs a job," well, what do you think she's going to say?
Right. Yeah. It's like, "Can he start on Monday?" Yeah. And I'll take good care of him.
And that's what it is. And it's with everything that we do. People think the only currency, right? We're conditioned, and I've been guilty of this, right? But we're conditioned from the time we are little to think that money is the only currency. But family is currency, and family is wealth, and community is currency, and doing people favors and doing things for people is currency, because anyone knows when someone does something nice for you, right? I know in my life, when someone does something nice for me, I decide right there in my mind, like, man, if this guy ever needs me, I'm going to make sure I step up. And that's true of most people. So there are many forms of currency, and that's what they don't want us to know, because the more we build community and take personal responsibility and homeschool our children and get out of debt and grow our own food and have in-group preference and start our own businesses, the more we do these things, the harder it is for them to control us and the more free we become.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The true wealth of the world. True wealth. Not just temporary things and stuff. Children are, you are the children of someone, and your children are the children of you, and their children. That lineage is so valuable. It's like you can't even put a number on it. You can't put a currency onto it. It's so valuable. But we kind of overlook that. Not me and you, but the royal we. Like, our society overlooks that and kind of seeks the temporary stuff. And like you say, it's just been trained. It's been ingrained in our brains because we just are trained to believe that way. We're trained to believe that a big house and social status and temporary pleasures are kind of the point of life and not what's actually meaningful, which is life itself. Your life, where you came from, and where life is going to be after you're gone from this temporary place. I love that.
The Bible is so true, and you are your fruit, and that has many meanings. You are your children and the men and women that you raise. You are the way you live your life, your relationships, what you build. The problem we see with so many of these personalities, I'll call them, right, these outrage machines, is they like to point out all the problems in the world, and they have these major platforms, but they don't look at their following, their herd, and show them that they can build something, right? They spent years talking about how outrageous Twitter was, right? But no one built a Twitter alternative, well, except Andrew Turbo and what he's doing over at Gab. But how many people actually Gab, right? And people love to point at all the problems and look, it's the liberals, it's the neocons. But the liberals and the neocons have a plan, and the liberals and the neocons are building. So if they're pursuing a plan and they're building, and the only thing we are doing is complaining, well, who do you think's going to win? So you have to build.
Right, yeah. And we are. We are. It's just not being televised. I think the Bears and then outward, even outside of our community, it is happening. But you're not hearing about it, And if you are hearing about it, it gets censored. they get canceled. If people are advocating to have big, strong families and return to God and reject evil, reject Babylon, you know, they're silenced, they're censored, they're pushed aside. You know, those are the people that go to Gap. Those are the people that go to Bertaria Times app or Social Galactic or whatever, the fringes of the social media, if you will. But it's happening. Like, the crush is happening. It's just not being televised. But that's kind of beautiful because it is happening, and like you're like every one of us plays a little bit of a part in it. You know, we just need to keep doing that. I think the big problem, the big enemy that we face, like me, you, people like us, bears, bear adjacents, whatever, groypers, all those different groups or whatever. The big problem is demoralize. Like, we get to we tend to be like this. We tend to get this feeling of hopelessness because we're not seeing the crush, right? We're not like, where you log on to Twitter and no one's crushing. You know, you go on to Instagram and no one's really crushing. You go on Facebook, no one's crushing, until you find a group like the Bears, and then you're like, whoa, these guys are crushing. You know, here's a big group of legends. You know, let me add them. Let me connect with them. So when you kind of tap into your little niche community and you see that, that's when hope gets reinstilled. But I think in general, overall, like, people that are crushing can tend to lose hope because they don't see it in their communities. They don't see it in their neighborhoods. They don't see it in their churches or in their Bible study groups or at their job or within their families, you know. But then they get tapped into some kind of community like the Bears, and it's just like, whoa. And then there's a spark. Then it's inspiration. Then there's a fire lit, and then the crushing doubles and multiplies. And what you're doing, like what you're doing with this networking, is going to, help stoke that fire. Not only in you, not only in people participating, but outwards. Like, that ripple effect is hope. It's just hope, you know, rippling out throughout the world. But it can be tough when you're not seeing it. You know, when you're not seeing the results, like, quantified on Twitter or quantified on Instagram or whatever. But it is happening.
Yeah, I like how you started that entire rant, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, my ramblings.